Hog Sty.
Welcome back to the Hog Sty, everybody. I am, of course, not Alex Cease, thankfully. I'm glad I'm not Alex. Of course, Alex is glad he's not me, too. I am Steve Thomas. Alex is out gallivanting around with holiday stuff, but fortunately, we have Dave. Dave is here. We love having Dave. Dave, how are you?
I am good. And you know what? And I do personally miss Alex. I think he brings the counter to you on every show.
I don't miss him at all. Are you kidding me?
Because
I'm always right, and I don't need someone questioning whether I'm right all the time.
Yeah, but I don't bring his quick-witted humor. I'm not at that level just yet for these shows.
Well, I mean, there's always someone trailing and lagging behind on these things, and that's that's your role to be the guy who's lagging behind all the time.
And you know what? I tend to be pretty used to
that. Well, you'll get there at one point. Don't worry, it'll be okay. And of course, you're preparing for the big, massive cold freeze apparently up there in Philadelphia.
Yes, right here on Friday, we're expecting a nice cold front to come through where we're going to be going from 50 right down to 16 degrees within a matter of just like 3-4 hours.
So I hear this from. I don't watch the news at all, and so I'm surprised by like major hurricanes because it's like I have no idea, and so right. I get these panicked messages from my mother. There's a massive storm. I had no idea before yesterday that there was going to be a storm.
Well, I mean, it's everything. Yeah, you're gonna come through. You're gonna be, you're gonna worry about anything. But usually, 9 times out of 10, when it comes through, it's not nearly as bad as what the weatherman here says and so forth. I mean, we've had years where they talk about, we're gonna have anywhere from like 24 to 36 inches of snow, or 18 to 24 inches of snow, and you wake up and you have a dusting. And then they'll sit there and say, we're going to have 3 inches of snow, and you wake up and your car is covered all the way up to the bumper. You're like, dude, that's not what you said.
Down here we're underwater, not that, but I get it. That's basically the same problem we have. Everybody thinks their weather is just awful, no matter where they live. But we're not here to talk about weather. Although, it won't affect the Washington game because they're going to the West Coast. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. But what we want to do is get into, of course, the topic du jour, which is Washington Giants, which was last Sunday's game. And for you Washington fans out there, it did not obviously go the way everybody hoped, rather. I predicted a loss. So matter of fact, I got pretty close. So Dave, let's tell you what, I want to do some basic stats, and then Dave, you just give us our thoughts here. So some basic numbers in this game, the important ones. Taylor Heineke, 17 for 29, 249 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. 3 sacks, quarterback rating 98.2. Pretty decent stats. We'll get into that. Brian Robinson, 12 for 89, 7.4 yards per carry. 12 carries. Can that be right? Yes, it is right. We'll get into that too. In the meantime, Antonio Gibson, 5 for 21. Not horrible. John Dotson, 4 for 105. Terry McLaurin, 6 for 70. Curtis Samuel, 3 for 44. And on defense, there were no sacks. But Bobby McCain was the leading tackler with 11. And there's no point in playing the Trustway game this week, unfortunately, which is my favorite thing to do. He was 4 for 177. So just tell you what, Dave, why don't we just start, just generally speaking, thoughts on this game. There's a lot to discuss. Obviously, there's a officiating controversy. Just general thoughts first.
I'm going to jump right to Brian Robinson Jr.
Okay.
Because I was listening to Scott Turner's press conference today, and I'll be honest with you, he didn't really do himself any service for some of the comments he had made, talking about how, they really should have kept more of a focus on Brian Robinson. We should have given him the ball more. He should have had more than 12 carries and so forth. And it's kind of a tune that we hear every single week. Focus on the run. We got to be consistent with the run and so forth. And some weeks they do pretty well. I mean, I'm not going to take it completely away from him, but in this game in particular, Brian Robinson Jr., out of his 12 carries, he only had 2 runs of under 4 yards all game long. The first drive in 11 plays, they ran the ball 5 times. Brian Robinson Jr. Touched it 3 times, and he ran for 7 yards, 5 yards, and 5 yards in that drive. That was kind of the running theme throughout the game until they got to the second half. And then all of a sudden, you have drives where they have a 6-play drive and Brian Robinson touches it once. And the game was never to a point where they had to abandon a run at any point in this game. They could have just kept pounding the ball all game long. And Brian Robinson Jr., at the rate that he was going, honestly, he should have carried the ball at least 25 times. He should have had a Derrick Henry night.
Yeah, I really didn't understand it either. I thought this was we've gone back and forth this year on the quality of Scott Turner's play calling. This one was really, I thought, a particularly weak game for him. And Brian Robinson certainly is at the top of the list. He seemed at every opportunity, as you pointed out. How many was it? Just 3 under 4 yards, 3 of 12? Is that what it was? 2. Okay. There's no excuse for just them totally abandoning him in the play calling like that. I didn't understand that at all. We told you guys in the game preview that the key to Washington's victory would be running. Right. For a variety of reasons. The Giants blitz a ton. What do you do to a team that blitzes? Well, let's run the ball a little bit. And it's working. And Taylor Heineke's a weird guy because his numbers looked okay, but it wasn't a strong performance by him at all. And we're going to get into him. But I don't know, man. I think Brian Robinson Jr., the more and more you look, the more and more you think that he is Washington's franchise back of the future.
Oh, absolutely.
It's early. He played 5 or 6 games or whatever. It's early. Maybe more games than that, but he looks great.
But he's just getting better every single week. And this game right here, because even in those drives, Curtis Samuels, I get the weapon that he provides, and I like the dynamic he brings to that offense. And he carried the ball 5 times for only 1 yard.
Isn't the game kind of up on Curtis Samuel?
It's kind of enough on that. It really is. It's just they're at a point to where if you want to use Curtis Samuels in the running game, probably a lot of what you want to start using him for, or they're at a point where it's more or less for more so misdirection, more so on using it to have Heineke roll out on bootlegs and so forth, because at least the defense is paying more attention to Curtis Samuels because he is effective when he has the open space for it. But when you have, Logan Thomas being bull rushed right back into his running path like he did on that one play, there's not much help you're going to get in that offensive line, which is a whole nother conversation.
Well, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that too.
Right.
But I just don't think Curtis Samuel is a traditional running back.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and I think his highest and best use, which we didn't see much of against the Giants, is gadget plays,
jet sweeps,
pitches, jet sweeps.
Yeah.
Heck, you could even run an option every once in a while with him if you really wanted to. It's not common in the NFL, but that's the type of back he is. He's not an interior back. And I think he kind of suffers to a certain extent to you see players that are sort of gadget players, and when they're on the field and they're in particular formations, it's a bit telegraphed, because he's in there, you sort of know.
Right.
But I tell you, to get back to Brian Robinson, this is the guy that I saw when I watched his college film after he got drafted. And I think it's translated very well, but I said from the beginning, this guy looks like a traditional NFL power back, which is what Washington has needed. They've tried to get him.
Absolutely.
They've tried to get guys like this multiple times and it just hasn't worked out. Jones, What was his first name? The running back from several years ago. The first name escaped me, but the second, third round pick, that guy.
Matt Jones.
Yeah, Matt Jones is kind of supposed to be this. It didn't work out, and there's been others. Brian Robinson Jr. so far looks like the real deal. So I hopefully that works out.
The one thing that was kind of a bit upsetting with all this is the fact that the Giants came into this offensive with a game plan of a quick passing attack, obviously getting Saquon Barkley going, which they did in this game, and so forth. But the best defense against that offense right now would have been keep feeding Brian Robinson Jr. the ball.
Time of possession and running.
Because it wound up being an even split by the end of the game. And seeing what Giants offense was doing against our defense, because we were getting no pressure on them at all. Brian Robinson Jr. should have been fed the ball until they were able to stop him.
Yeah, and it was really a game plan problem.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Right.
Like I know our buddy Alex has repeatedly questioned it, as among many others, whether Scott Turner's the type of guy we'd even have this job if his dad wasn't Norv. And we've talked about this before, at least on It's Just Business. I mean, if not here, the NFL is a very sycophantic, kind of place, and it's who you know and who your daddy is, and there's a lot of that in the NFL.
Sure, a lot of nepotism going on.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean sycophant. I mean nepotism. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
And it's a lot of nepotism, to the point where I sometimes don't think, in all seriousness, the best pure football coaches are really even in the NFL. Yeah, there's a lot of coaches who really know what they're doing. I'm not talking about knuckleheads like us who are just babbling on the radio.
Sure.
I'm real coaches who really know what they're doing, and they just don't get a shot, And then you have a guy like Scott Turner, who's had his moments, but he's also had a lot of moments that are really bad. And I think this was really bad. And listen, I mean, people can talk about the talent all you want, and Washington does have some talent. Jahan Dotson had a great game.
Yep.
The 61-yard pass, I would like to point out, in case you all were under a rock, that if Taylor Heineke's arm had been better, that was a touchdown.
Well, there were two other passes in that game where if his arm was any better,
yeah,
there would have been a touchdown.
Right.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. And so that's Heineke's limitation. You saw it. The one on the sideline, that was Dotson, right? The one on the sideline.
I believe the one you're talking about is Curtis Samuels on the sideline.
Maybe so. Maybe that was Samuel, but had to slow down.
Yep.
Wait, he was 5 yards past the DB. And what happened? The pass is so underthrown.
And you also look at that flea flicker too, as well. The same thing you're talking about.
The other thing. Yeah, same exact thing. So that's the limitations of this team. But, there is some talent in the skill positions. Brian Robinson seems to be, so far in limited action, the real deal. Jahan Dotson, I think, is maybe better than Terry McLaurin when it's all said and done. So they've got the two receivers, but what do they need? I mean, you mentioned Logan Thomas earlier. The guy's not had a good season at all. He's done absolutely nothing. Understand, however, he's coming back from serious knee injury himself, and he came back very, very, very quickly. So, I mean, should they cut him immediately? No, I mean, he did good things last year, so we'll see. But that's the skill position in this game. Is that, I mean, the offensive line, I don't even really know what to say anymore. I mean, there were so many injuries. There's been so many changes, and what, like I've said before, Ron Rivera's biggest fault, I think, as a coach in Washington has been this destruction of a pretty good offensive line. And we see it every week.
Absolutely. And, I mean, and this game was no different. I mean, Heinicke was under duress. I mean, look at the Thibodeau touchdown, the strip sack and touchdown he had in the first half. Yeah, I mean, he couldn't stand. I mean, there was absolutely nothing that Heinicke could have done in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, you fault him for the strip sack if you want. I mean, it happens, but it was really more that he was blitzed instantaneously that, caused the problem. And he fumbled it, on him. But
now,
the sack.
Now the one thing I have noticed that Heinicke does not do very well is that he doesn't recognize the design blitzes where you have your safety coming up and your linebacker coming up, and you got to figure out which one's coming. And he was struggling on figuring that out. And I think Chris Collinsworth kind of touched on that a little bit during that game. So, I
think that's fair. I mean, look, the guy has his faults. I mean, it's none of this is new. We know he's got great intangibles. We know his teammates love him. We know he's gutsy. We know all of that. We know he's got a substandard arm by NFL standards. We know he makes weird decisions sometimes. I also know that Scott Turner doesn't use his mobility as much as they should. Why on earth aren't there more design rollouts with this guy?
Right.
Can somebody answer that for me? Why?
That's mind blowing. I agree with that.
Yeah, I just don't get it.
That's just
Yeah, and it's like I've seen this in offensive coordinators. We all have for years. They're stuck in their system, and they don't adapt to the talent they have very well. The guy who was a master of this was Joe Gibbs.
Right.
In his first tenure, was a master of adapting to his talent, and I just don't think Scott Turner really has that in him, and that's what we see. But at the end of the day, we're gonna get to. I want to get touch on the officials. I'll tell you what. Let's do defense here first.
Okay.
Um, you know, what sticks out with me is Saquon Barkley, 18 or 87, 4.8 yards per attempt. Um, Good, not great. It wasn't like a Saquon Pro Bowl, kind of day for him. And other than that, I mean, none of these players really stuck out to me on with the Giants, and except Kayvon Thibodeau was one, and I lost my notes. Who's the other one? Really did Dexter Lawrence.
Dexter Lawrence, yeah.
Yeah, those two guys really did. But in terms of defense, I don't know if we learned too much about Washington's defense in this game. It was kind of more of the same.
Well, I think overall defensively, if you take away the 97-yard drive they had and the one drive where they essentially had the game-winning field goal, I mean, you take their drives away. Essentially, Washington's defense had a good game. I mean, the Giants' third down efficiency was only 20%. They're only 2 of 10.
Also, the strip sack,
Yeah. So absolutely, and it's like,
so the offense didn't do much. Is what we're saying.
No, it didn't. But see, they came through at the key moments in the game, as Saquon Barkley did on that one drive where he was gashing us for what seemed like double-digit runs every time, and it was like right up the middle every single time, which was actually surprising to me because of us having Payne and Allen right there. But they were basically parting the Red Sea for him on that one drive, and that was a drive. I think they ultimately ended up kicking a field goal on that drive. I think that was.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was. But I mean, there's only so much that defense can do when the offense is getting on the field and either turning the ball over or getting a 3 and out, and that happened on a few occasions. So
I want to run over some numbers because I haven't been putting the rolling season stats in the game previews this year because it's so much work.
Mm-hmm.
It is a ton of work to do all that, and I wasn't sure how many people really cared about it, to be perfectly honest, except me. But so I do want to run through some defensive stats in case. Are you out there wondering if you're being a homer by saying Washington has a good defense? Because there's a lot of homers. That's what nature of fandom is. I'm not faulting anybody for it. So, Washington's given up 276 points. That is ranked 9th in the NFL. They've surrendered 4,324 yards. That is ranked 4th in the NFL. That's total yards. From a passing perspective, they have surrendered 2,761 yards, which is ranked 8th in the NFL. In a quarterback rating, they've given up a 91 quarterback rating, which is 17th. Completion percentage is 61.9, which is ranked 6th.
Mm-hmm.
If you want sacks, let's do sacks, shall we? 34 sacks, which is ranked 16th. Now, rushing-wise, 4.4 yards per attempt, which is ranked 12th. And then yards-wise is 12th as well. So that's kind of where Washington stands. So what does this tell us? They do have an above-average defense. It's not just a bunch of homers making this up. Their defense is, in fact, above average. They've done better against the pass than the run, which I think we knew that, but they've also improved in recent weeks against the run.
Right.
So I think it really makes me wonder, one, if Chase Young ever comes back, how he's going to fit in. And you mentioned this last week, if I recall.
Right.
John Widgway and others have been playing well. Is the dude going to come in and freelance? But I think as a result of the numbers, I think it is fair to say that Washington's front four is, in fact, more or less what the fans think it is in terms of quality.
Right.
Would you say? And I think we saw that against the Giants. The Giants aren't, the 85 Bears or anything, but, they've been winning. Their offense isn't great, but Washington held that offense down for the most part. They
Well,
scored
yeah,
13 points.
right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like it was a quick passing game is what got the offense moving,
But
and it
it
was the
barely
only
moved.
thing that
Like you
got the
pointed out, one of those touchdowns was a strip sack on
yes.
Heineke's fumble. So they really only scored, 13 points.
Yeah, that's it. And he only had what 160 total net yards on passing anyway on that game. Daniel Jones, that is, and we all know that a quick offense like that all game long isn't sustainable anyway. But they were able to utilize it enough and get in field goal range and get the necessary points that they had to do just to maintain the distance on that scoreboard that they needed to get to. The biggest issue that we had was our offense was just not matching what our defense is doing.
Washington's offense
It's very
sucks.
anemic.
Okay. I mean, that's why I was saying earlier, there's some talent in the skill positions. I don't think it's great, but it is some. But they just can't put together. And it's not just Taylor Heineke, okay? It is not. He's part of it, but it's a combination of offensive line. They need a tight end. Before Robinson, even with Robinson in the first few weeks when he was back, the running game was horrible, including
Right.
Robinson in terms of statistical production. So, I think Jahan Dotson's made a big difference because he's another weapon that people have to actually care about.
Yep.
Other than Terry McLaurin. So if you want to see some numbers, oh, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. Hold on, folks. Here we go.
What was
Okay.
Brian Robinson's yards after contact? That's what I'm curious about.
I don't have that right in front of me. I'll try to look it up if I can get to it before the end of the show.
Yeah, because that's one thing I've noticed. It's like a lot of times he's met within the first yard of having the ball. I mean, he's constantly
That's an
driving off
offensive
a
line
contact
problem.
bounce. Absolutely.
He had one of the best, about 15-yard or so runs I've ever seen in this game.
Yeah. Yes.
Dragged multiple people with him. So here's some
Mhm.
basic numbers. Washington has scored 265 points, which is ranked 25th in the NFL. And yardage-wise, sorted wrong. Yardage-wise are 20th with almost 4,700 yards. That's total yards. Passing offense, 21st, 2,920 passing yards. And then completion percentage is not good. 61.7%, which is 21st. So that's the passing game. You can see the limitations there in the statistical production. And in the ground game, 4.2 yards per carry, which is 23rd. And that is a dramatic uptick over the past couple weeks because of Robinson. They were way down at the bitter bottom, almost at the bottom.
Right.
And so that's sort of where they are. If you want quarterback rating, I didn't do that one. Quarterback rating 86 overall, which is 22nd. Look, it's a below average defense. It's not. I don't necessarily think that they are the early 2000s Ravens when they had a elite level defense. Statistically, they're not that.
No.
But their offense is about like the Trent Dilfer offense.
Yeah, no kidding.
So they're just to go forward in the playoffs if they get there. They're just going to have to do better or they won't go far. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, Dave. I want you to start because you wrote a column about it. About half of it was about the officiating. I have thoughts, but talk to me about the officiating in this game.
Well, you know what? I was going to start with the final play of the game because there were like 3 different penalties that could have been called on that one play against Curtis Samuel. But I'm actually going to start with the touchdown that was taken off the board because of the illegal formation call against Terry McLaurin.
Okay.
And the problem I have with that is that he did what every receiver does. He got to the line, looked at the receiver or looked at the official. The official pointed to the ground, move up a little bit. He moved up a little bit, gave a thumbs up to the official, and the official was good. And right before the ball was even snapped, if you watch the video, the ref put this hand right on his flag. And the minute that ball was hiked, he just threw the flag right out. It was like he knew, even though McLaurin was checking with him, he knew he was throwing that flag. And that right there it just burns me up because there's no way when a receiver is checking with you, make sure he's lined up right. There's no way he should never be not lined up right, especially when you give him a thumbs up and you don't and you do not give him any more adjustments. It's just some people might look at that as kind of, well, that's nothing compared to the not calling the end zone, and I get that, but that's just a small part of the game. That's just makes no sense to me.
First of all, I have checked with refs in games exactly like that. I mean, I was obviously just a high school player, but
Sure,
receivers do that, because that was what our coaches taught us: check and make sure you're lined up.
Yeah.
So allow me to present an alternative viewpoint to this, because I have an alternative theory about what I think happened. I've watched this film numerous times. So, first of all, McLaurin was lined up about a yard off where he should be. To me, there's no debate. That's on film. He was, in fact, too far back. He was off the line of scrimmage. He looks over at the ref. The ref points as if to say, and there's no audio anywhere, by the way. It does not exist. It appears to me, McLaurin checks with him. The ref points. McLaurin scooted up like a few inches in response to that, and then turned away, and then kind of waved at the ref a little bit, but never looked at him again. And then, yes, the ref then definitely put his right arm on the flag, but I never saw a thumbs up. What I saw was him pointing as if to say move up. McLaurin moved up a little bit, but not enough. He needed to take an entire step up, and he didn't.
Right.
And so what I actually think happened is it's more of a miscommunication more than anything. Well, I think McLaurin thought he moved up enough and really didn't, and the ref saw this from the jump and knew he was behind, and that's why he was ready with the flag, because McLaurin did not move up enough after the ref, I think, pointed at him, told him to move up. Now, that is not what McLaurin said happened in an interview. I think it was...
That's where I was going to get to, yeah.
Yeah, but I just, in the heat of the moment, I think they basically miscommunicated. And I do also have to say that the ref's under no obligation to tell him anything.
No, you're right about that, yeah. You're right.
But if you're going to tell him, it's kind of... If the story happened the way Terry McLaurin told it, it's kind of lousy. But I don't think that I'm not calling McLaurin a liar or anything. I just think in the heat of the moment they misunderstood each other, and I think the ref, it looked to me, because again, I never saw a thumbs up. I saw him point, and I think what the ref was really saying was, you got to move up, point, move up, and he didn't, but he thought he did. And so that's what I think happened. I think they just miscommunicated.
And the only reason why I lean on the McLaurin video, which I was going to talk about too, with him saying what he said, was because the one thing McLaurin has always been very, very good at was taking self-accountability. Whenever he's made the mistakes, whether it was a play or a penalty that was part of, he's always right away, has always taken. He's always been very much, always held himself self-accountable.
He's an outstanding citizen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't deny that at all.
So when I hear that, and I hear they had that line of communication, for me, that plays a little more into the conversation than if Antonio Brown were to sit there and say that. If Antonio Brown says that, I was like, yeah, you were just hearing voices in your head. You know what I mean?
But at the end of the day, if you look at the film, he was lined up off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
No matter who said what to anybody, he was lined up a yard back, or
and like
you said,
or so. And like you said, the officials have,
no obligation to do that, but it is standard practice. Yeah. Right. And again, I think Terry McLaurin is an upstanding citizen. All of that, and he did say in an interview, to be 100% fair about it, he did say I was lining up in that spot the whole game. I didn't go back and recheck all that. I haven't had time this week, but so I can't answer that. But I just think McLaurin thought he did what the ref either totally misinterpreted what the ref was saying, or thought he did it, because he did move. If you notice, I watched it over again. He did move up tiny. He took like half of a foot, maybe. He kind of moved up, and that's when the ref. Then he looked away, and McLaurin moved his arm at him, but never looked back at him. And that's when the ref put his hand on his waist.
Right. Now,
flag is.
This is also why I started with the McLaurin call right there, because Chris Collinsworth in that game, on the non-call on Curtis Samuel, the one comment he made, which is pretty much standard in the league with most officials, from what I understand, is that when it's that late in the game, is that vital, and calls become that much more vital. The officials try not to be part of the end result, right? I say that
it's terrible. I mean, isn't it? Go ahead.
Yeah, it is absolutely. But I say that because if you're going to throw a flag on a receiver who's trying to get lined up and communicate with you, but ultimately with the play that goes away from the receiver and the receiver has nothing to do with the play, but you call a flag on that, but yet you're too afraid to throw a flag on the Curtis Samuel when, one, there was illegal contact because they were beyond 5 yards, so he had illegal contact, and then when he got out in his break, you saw the hand around the waist. He was holding him coming out of it, so he had a holding right there. And then on top of that, when the ball was in the air, you had the pass interference. He was basically hugging him and almost straddled him. So it's like
that was one of the more egregious misses you will find.
Absolutely. But it's like but yet you want to. So the officials want to sit there and say, "Well, I don't want to determine the end result of this game," but yet just a play or two before. Something that, I mean, if anything, with McLaurin, the play, if anything, you hold the flag.
Well, yeah, you got to be consistent, right? And number one, I don't think these refs need to kind of quote let them play at the end of the game. Either it's a penalty or it's not a penalty, and it ought to be the same for 60 minutes.
Right. So if the McLaurin was a penalty, which I will agree with you, it was a penalty because ultimately he was off the line. If that was a penalty, that non-call for pass interference was far more severe and far more egregious. That absolutely should have drawn like 3 flags in that play.
Yeah, and of course, yes. And so I think we agree there. We disagree a little bit on McLaurin, but, we agree on Curtis Samuel for sure. And although I will say the other thing is this did not cost Washington the game.
No, it did not. I agree.
It cost Washington a chance to tie the game in a game in which they otherwise scored 12 points. Yes. And so the real cause of a loss really was that the offense sucked. Okay? Mm-hmm. Can we admit that? I mean, yes, absolutely. They got jobbed on a pass interference and a holding and help me, what was the other one? Pass interference, holding.
Yes. Pass interference, holding, and illegal contact.
Yeah, thank you. Illegal contact. I mean, all of that for sure. But at the end of the day, if the offense had been even league average.
And besides, you look at how this offense has been inside the 10. Are you so sure we even make that 2-point conversion anyway?
No, it's Washington doesn't make a ton of those. That's what I'm saying. It's not
right.
They got jobbed on that play, no doubt. But that wasn't the winning touch score that got taken off the board. It was a chance to tie. Right. Just to be clear. But again, I think the more important, bigger picture issue is the team only scored 12 points.
Yes.
If you have a league average offense, then, we're not in this situation.
And for those that, and you know me and my position on Wentz all year, I was on the side. I like the trade. I like the potential of it, all that stuff. I mean, everybody knows that. But I also had the fair criticisms of them because of holding the ball too long, taking bad sacks, poor decisions, all that stuff. And that stemmed off the offensive line. But, I mean, we all know what stems off the offensive line. But for those during the game saying, well, if Wentz is in this game, we win this game. I'm like, if Wentz is in this game with the rush that the Giants was producing, Wentz would have taken far more sacks, bad sacks, because he holds on to the ball too long, and the decisions that he makes on trying to push the ball downfield right away with the offensive line not giving enough time, those plays developing downfield would have been like earlier in the year. He would not have had the time to push it downfield, so where at least Heineke is trying to check it down right away and get the short passes. Yeah. Wentz isn't that kind of a quarterback. So if Wentz was in that game, for as much of a fan I am with Wentz, the way this game went, I still don't even think we win that game with Wentz in that game.
Yeah, it might not have gone well. Okay, we got to move on because we got
Yeah.
lots to talk about. But players of the game, um, I'm going to give my players of the game award here to Jahan Dotson, who looked like a big stud in terms of receiving ability. Uh, I think he's got a bright future, and I don't know how anybody but Kayvon Thibodeau doesn't deserve the defensive game ball. So
Right.
Kayvon Thibodeau and Jahan Dotson.
Well, I'm going to go Brian Robinson Jr. So you actually didn't steal my boy on that one, where I'm a big Dotson guy. I had this what Brian Robinson Jr. did in this game and what he should have kept doing in this game. He definitely, I mean, he was just a beast in this game, And I'm going to go with another defensive lineman on the Giants which was Derek Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence,
Yeah.
yes, Dexter Lawrence. He does a fantastic job of pushing that pocket and plugging.
I thought about Lawrence. He deserved it. He deserved game ball too. You're right about that. Okay, so that's our game balls. So nonetheless, Washington moves on. So at this point, Dave, do you have the playoff standings right in front of you?
The playoff standings in front of me?
Well, so for those of you wondering, I believe Washington obviously has San Francisco coming up, and because we were dumb, we didn't pull up the playoff standings right in front of us. So we'll get this here in just one moment. If you can give me 1 second.
Well, I know right now we from this loss, we went from having the potential of having an 81% chance on making the playoffs to now down to 31% chance. And the reason why, now I know people look at the numbers, they switch a lot, they change a lot, and even you feel that way. They're kind of meaningless.
Percentages are kind of meaningless in my view.
Yeah, but I hold them a little bit of relevance only because of what we have coming up: San Francisco, Cleveland, and then Dallas. And we already have a low percentage of maintaining that. That's tough.
Okay,
in my opinion.
Here's what I'm getting at. I finally found it. So Washington essentially dropped from the 6th seed to the 7th seed.
Yeah.
And they're not going to overcome the Giants absent a total collapse and Washington wins 3 games. Because the Giants now have what amounts to a 2-game lead, basically, because of the tie and the victory.
And if they win, coupled with a Seattle and Detroit loss, they lock in that spot.
Yeah, and so Washington is now competing with the Seahawks and the Lions for the 7th seed in this thing, and Washington has a half game up on both because of the tie. So that's where we are. So this becomes – so now we get to the San Francisco 49er game, which is an important game for Washington. Unfortunately, they're playing the best defense in the NFL, so I actually want to start with this. What do you do against a 49ers defense that is number 1 in points surrendered, number 1 in yards surrendered? Both. They have Nick Bosa, who has 15.5 sacks this year. And I think their passing offense is a bit weaker. Statistically, they've given up a little bit more, but their running defense is number 1 in the NFL, and it ain't close.
Right.
Okay, by far the best run defense in the league. Statistically, just they have the look of it. They've only given out 3.4 yards per attempt. If you ask me, I think the game plan, first of all, it's unlikely Washington does well in this game. Let's get that out offensively. But if you have to have a game plan, the game plan needs to be, this is not a game where you run 35 times a game because it's not going to go well. Odds are. So this means you need to wake up your short passing game because you're going to have Nick Bosa facing off Charles Leno, which isn't exactly – he's not exactly Joe Jacoby.
No. Yeah.
And Nick Bosa is an all-pro, 15.5 sacks in 14 weeks. So if you ask me, I think Washington's game plan needs to be a short passing game.
Right.
That's how you have a shot, I think. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's funny you said because there was a poll I saw someone run on Twitter, and he said, well, they gave options on what was the best game plan against San Francisco defense. I was reading the polls. I say, okay, run the ball, No, not so much because of what you say. They're rather dominant running in the run game. Okay, so then we go with the short to quick passing game. Well, the only problem with that is that you need to have at least a little bit of time to be able to complete these passes. And when you're going against someone like Fred Warner that takes away the middle of the field, and I forget the name of their slot corner they have, which was actually a pretty good corner. The middle of the field is not going to be available. A lot of their plays that they give up in the passing game is really on the outside the hash marks, even though they have good corners.
Talking about Jimmy Ward?
Yeah, Jimmy Ward.
The nickelback?
Yes.
Corner? Yeah.
So in terms of the middle of the field and the intermediate zone, San Francisco does pretty well in defending that because they have the players to do so. So now you're going to try to push everything to the outside of the hash marks and downfield potentially.
But I don't think you're going to have time for a ton of long development.
No, absolutely not. And that's my point. Because right now, if you're at the middle of the field is being taken away and you don't have a running game, and then you got to rely on Heineke to get the ball outside the hash marks, which we know his arm isn't strong enough for that on the most part. You know, you have that, and you're definitely not going to have time to get the ball downfield. What is the best game plan, against this defense? You got to
have something, though. I mean, we got to give him something, Dave.
We got to give him something. But see, that's where I go.
Quick short passes and flats.
Well, that's
what
true.
I think the game plan is.
But see, what has to go back to what you talked about in the beginning of the show. You've got to get Heineke on the run. You got to move him. You got to use to see. This is where Curtis Samuels comes into play for jet sweeps, and you misdirection plays, and you pull Heineke away from that defensive rush, and then you bring someone like McLaurin or Dotson across the middle of the field to have a dump off option. And if they bring the safety up to cover that, then you have the other receiver maybe streaking down behind that coverage where you could dump it off. And then this is where you need kind of Logan Thomas to kind of take that next step for us if he can this week. And he has to be that one big target in the zone when neither receiver options are there. It's going to be tough. But that's the only way you're going to do. You have to get Heineke on the move, rollouts, bootlegs, whatever you need to do. And you got to spread this defense out. That's the only way you're going to get anything going against the defense.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you don't get Heineke on the move, it's just not going to go well this week.
No, absolutely not. In fact, if you don't get him on the move, and I'm being serious, not joking either. If you don't get him on the move, he's going to get hurt in this game.
He could. And can we just dispense? Because I know there have been, at least they were in the comment section and the website and whatnot. So I'm assuming on Twitter too. You can tell me there are still people calling for Sam Howell to play this week. That's freaking crazy. Okay. Yes. Does everybody understand what we just said, which is this is the best defense in the NFL, who, by the way, are in a playoff run themselves. And they have Nick Bosa, Mr. 15 and a half. That's crazy that you would throw Sam Howell to the Wolves like that without an injury. I don't understand what you people are thinking in that regard.
Well, I actually saw someone on Twitter post, well, you look at Sam Howell's final year at North Carolina, where he had no offensive line, all his weapons are gone, and he still managed to move around and have a decent year. I'm like, yeah, but he's also not going against the SEC every week and going against NFL-ready linebackers.
Exactly.
He's not going against defensive linemen that are probably just as fast as him on the most part. I mean, this is the NFL.
And this isn't just the NFL. This is the 49ers we're talking about here.
Yes.
I just think it's crazy. Stop. I don't know what you guys are thinking by saying stupid things like that.
Now we get to the Cleveland game. Sure, okay.
Well, I don't know.
That's a little bit different.
If Washington pulls out a win, there's no way they need to throw a rookie out there.
No,
if they're in the playoff hunt, Ron Rivera should not do that.
Right. Well, I'm just saying that they lose to San Francisco. They're basically
not
done.
Still be over. It depends on what happens with the 49ers and with the Lions.
No, that's
if
true.
Everybody loses, it's status quo.
Right.
Right? And so it depends. I think Ron Rivera will not do that his team is still in the playoff race. If
No,
they're
I
out of the
agree.
playoff race, yes. Okay, so
Okay.
that is the defense. So in terms of the 49ers offense, um, what everybody needs to know about this, if you've been living under a rock, this is the Brock Purdy show. Who is Brock Purdy? Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant in this draft. Jimmy Garoppolo goes down with an injury. Brock Purdy comes up, starts lighting things up. And I'd be darned if he hasn't had 2 good games. He really has. Um, all the same, this is not John Elway we're talking about here.
No.
Washington has a talented offensive defensive line of its own, as we've said. So what do you do with a young rookie? Say it with me. Everybody all at once. Pressure him,
Blitz
right?
him, blitz him, blitz him. Yep.
Yes. But I don't think this is a game where you can have too many crazy blitzes taking people out of coverage. I think you need to get pressure with the front four because Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, these guys are talented.
Well,
And
Deebo Samuels won't be. He's out.
oh, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah, he's
But
out.
but McCaffrey, I mean, do you really want to let him run around?
And you got Kittle you have to worry about.
Yeah, right.
Ayuk. Yeah.
There's a lot of talent there. So
Yep.
I don't think they can afford to do things like have Jeremy Reeves blitz out of the, or a corner or something. You don't know corner blitzes. I think this is a game above all this is a game more than others that the front four really needs to come through.
Yeah. And in fact, Brock Purdy just reminds me, or it makes me think of a stronger arm version of Taylor Heineke.
I don't know. I honestly haven't watched enough Brock Purdy to know. Does he really have a stronger arm? I have no idea.
It's every pass I see him go downfield. I haven't seen a receiver have
He
to
looked
come
good
back
in
for it.
very little. I watched half of one
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. But it's like every time he goes downfield, I don't see the receivers continuously having to come back and play it like a 50-50 ball.
He does seem to have, ice water for veins. So
yeah. So
yeah.
But it's you have to find a way to confuse him. You have to design your coverages and your blitzes properly, and you have to find a way to confuse him.
Yep.
And then you have to force him to make a mistake.
So, having said all this, and by the way, McCaffrey has looked great as a 49er.
Of course.
And on the season total, he's averaging 4.6 yards per rush. 41 receptions. So he's the Christian McCaffrey of old.
Yep.
It seems, and that's not good if you're a Washington fan. So given all this, we do need to move on because we've got other things to talk about.
Sure.
Predictions time. I gave our game balls first, so you need to go first with predictions.
34-13 49ers.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean I don't think you're being overly negative. I think you're being honest.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see how Washington can score too many points. Just for the record, the Seahawks. Wait a minute. No, that's wrong. The Chiefs put up 44 points on them, and the Falcons put 28 points. Beyond that, no team has done more than 19. They had 2 bad games. Beyond that, nothing. So I think you're looking at maybe. I think Washington's defense will hold them moderately so. So I think we're looking at maybe 31-10.
Well, I think the defense will play well. I just think Heineke's going to be forced into turnovers, and I think the defense is definitely going to score.
Yeah, I was about to say 28, but I don't know. I'm going to actually revise mine. I'm going to say 24-10.
Okay.
San Francisco. Okay, so that is game preview. For those of you who remain Washington fans, it could be a tough week. So, next up on the chopping block here is the NFL just tonight. Just before we went on the air here, announced Pro Bowl rosters. So, we will go over Washington's selections, and then we will give some basic thoughts on the list as a whole. So Washington, surprisingly, did fairly well. Terry McLaurin selected not to be a starter, but he's one of the 4 receivers selected to the NFC team. So congratulations to Terry McLaurin. And then we have Jonathan Allen was selected as a starter as an interior lineman, so congratulations to him. Tress Way is the punter. Finally, that man is getting the recognition he deserves. I mean, I'm not
Yep.
even really a Washington fan anymore. I'm a big fan of Tress Way. We had him on the show, I think, before you were with us, Dave.
Yes.
Good dude. And so very surprisingly, Jeremy Reeves was the special teamer. So Washington had 4. So thoughts on Washington selections, David?
I thought it was well deserved for McLaurin, no doubt, and Jonathan Allen. But I'll be honest with you. I don't. I really thought that maybe. I really thought that Forrest earned a spot on this roster one way or another. I thought that he had a good enough year for that, and either that or Deron Payne.
Yeah, I was going to suggest Ron Payne might have been the guy.
Yeah.
And I don't really think anybody else on the offense really deserves even any consideration.
If Dotson wasn't hurt, he might have gotten that consideration, but he wouldn't have gotten over McLaurin.
Yeah, I
but,
mean,
but he was. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was pretty. I think all of this is pretty fair. I mean, Joey Sly probably deserved at least some consideration. You know, he was a special teamer of the month. Remember,
right?
And so, but I think this is fairly fair for Washington. And 4 is a lot for this team. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is Washington. Now, I don't want to read all these names, but let's just go over a couple of them. And tell you what, we're running out of time. We'll do AFC like next week, maybe.
Okay.
Jalen Hurts, starting quarterback. Thoughts?
There's nobody else in the NFC that's better than him right now.
I mean,
he's been lights out.
MVP.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I think Mahomes might have surpassed him just a hair. And with Jalen Hurts missing this weekend with injury, I think Mahomes will probably squeak that out.
By the way, I went to the Texans Chiefs game this week. It's a good time. Good time had by all. Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah.
In fact, the Texans had him on the ropes a little early.
Yeah, they really did. Yeah. I mean, you know, the Chiefs kicker missed the extra point and a field goal, but yeah, by Texan standards, yeah. Okay, I just point out in the quarterback room that Kirk Cousins was selected to the Pro Bowl as the third selectee. So I'm sure he is no doubt telling Washington to suck it. Yeah. Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, those 2 guys, neither one surprised me. Barkley a little bit. Barkley's the standard, the starter. That surprised me a bit. I think that's kind of maybe a bit of banking on his name. I'm not saying he didn't deserve to be there, but starter, I'm not sure. I maybe would have picked Pollard over Barkley to be the starter.
I'm just wondering where Christian McCaffrey's name's on this thing.
Yeah, it's not there at all. Hence,
yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. He should be there over Miles Sanders.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Other receivers, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown. There's no question those 2 guys belong there. C.D. Lamb's with Dallas. He's going to get the votes. You know, that's just it. Tight ends.
And the one thing I'll add on A.J. Brown, listen, I love McLaurin just as much as anybody else, but A.J. Brown has been, when healthy, and he's been healthy all year, a better receiver than McLaurin.
Yes.
Period.
That's fair. It's fair.
Yes.
People may not like to hear that, but it's just the truth.
Absolutely.
And I've seen Terry McLaurin get slowed down and held to nothing too many times by elite corners. You know? Tight ends, Kittle and TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson surprises me a little bit.
I agree.
Now here's the one. You know who the starting left tackles are?
Oh, yeah. Good old Trent Williams.
Trent Williams, Lane Johnson.
Yeah.
Starting tackles. Washington fans hate the Eagles. Trent Williams.
What a blunder.
The magnitude of the roster mismanagement that Washington went through to allow Trent Williams to walk out for a bag of Doritos to the 49ers.
Now, do you believe what was reported in terms that Bruce Allen wanted to sign him, but Daniel Snyder said no, not a penny, and let him go?
I mean, Dave is referring to Bruce Allen's deposition in front of Congress, and he said that. Who knows? I don't even want to relive it. Well, it's not. I mean, because I don't really care anymore. But
Yeah, I
what do
know.
I think happened? It's just impossible to tell. Both of them are slime balls. Okay, Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder are both slime balls. A real team would have sat him down and fixed the problem and gone, "Look, our medical people screwed up. Sorry. We'll
Well,
get it fixed. But Trent, we ain't trading you. We're
well,
not
Ron
trading you."
Rivera, Ron Rivera had that opportunity, and Ron Rivera should have just simply sat down and said, "Listen,
No.
we're working this out
Yeah.
one way or another. You're not going
Yeah, that's what
anywhere."
I'm saying. That's what I
Boom.
said from the beginning.
Yeah.
Is when this happened 2 years ago. I said that.
Yep.
You don't trade a Hall of Famer in his prime.
Right.
It's just ridiculous. So anyway, so we move on from that. Zach Martin, guard, Dallas. That kind of surprised both of us a little bit when we talked about this pre-show. Center Jason Kelsey, no surprise. So
Right.
defense, no surprises. Defensive ends: Nick Bosa, Brian Burns, DeMarcus Lawrence. I mean, there you
Yeah.
go.
Right.
The other interior lineman, Jonathan Allen's in good company. Aaron Donald, Dexter Lawrence. Linebackers, Micah Parsons. Dallas has fallen into one of the best linebackers in the NFL.
Yep.
Um,
And the Eagles acquired one or signed one in Hassan Reddick.
Hassan Reddick, right?
Yeah.
Who is the third selectee?
Yep.
Fred Warner, Demario Davis, corners, Darius Slade, Trayvon Diggs are the starters. Both
Well,
of them
go
well
back to
deserved.
Demario Davis. I do believe someone beat the drum for him this offseason, right?
Yes, I did beat the drum for Demario Davis. I've written columns, including him as someone Washington should have signed, and the team clearly did not pay attention to me.
No.
Safeties, Quandre Diggs from the Seahawks, well deserved. Buda Baker from the Cardinals, well deserved. And for those of you wondering, Jason Myers was the place kicker, and certainly the return specialist does not need to be from Washington because theirs are horrible. So that is special
Well, you don't like
teams.
Dax Milne?
Objectively, no. I do not. I think he's below average.
Well, actually, speaking of Dax Milne, I thought for sure he got hurt on that one punt return that he had, the way he was bent backwards. Where
Yeah.
that was brutal. But yeah,
Okay. We are quickly running out of time here, but one final thing I wanted to get through is I noticed that Franco Harris died.
yes,
And so Franco Harris is one of the all-time great running backs. For those of you who are not old enough to remember how great he was, and he was a bit before Dave and I's time, really.
Yeah.
We were very, very, very little kids. But Franco Harris was the biggest star running back in the league for a lot of years. And so just to give everybody an idea, the game was so different back then. He averaged only 4.1 yards per carry. But that's how running backs were. Remember, John Reagan's was at like 3.8 for a
Yeah.
career. Franco Harris, for those of you who have not seen the Immaculate Reception, Franco Harris was the Immaculate Reception. This was in obviously a Steelers game, and the ball careened weirdly and crazily right into Franco Harris's hands. He scooped it up like an inch off the ground
Yep.
and ran in for a touchdown, saved the game. So Franco Harris, great running back. You got to take his numbers into context for the time, which was vastly different. Great running back. Rest in peace. Do you have anything to add before we sign off here today, Dave?
Well, I just on Franco Harris kind of goes that whole theme that I kind of tell even some of the younger guys at work when they start comparing newer players to older players. Man, is it back then? The rules were not like they were. I mean, it was just some of these personal foul calls weren't even considered back then.
Right.
And the way that they mauled everyone on the interior part of the line and everything, it was a rough game. It's just. And for
People
him,
don't understand how dramatically different the game was back then.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the average. I mean, even in the 80s, the average just over 4 yards a carry was considered a really good running back. I mean, it was just like in the early 80s.
By the way,
Yeah.
along these same lines, this is maybe for another show because we're out of time here, but I noticed that the NFL is considering drastically upping the penalties for roughing the passer.
Because Lord knows we need that.
I know, it's crazy. So we'll sign off with this. So Franco Harris, 4-time Super Bowl champion, NFL Super Bowl MVP, NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, Man of the Year, first team All Pro, 2-time second team All Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler. So truly great, one of the greats. Died at the age of 72. I didn't see what he died of, but rest in peace. And our best wishes to his family.
Absolutely.
So that is it for the show. We will be back after Washington's game against the 49ers next week. Hope everyone has a Merry Christmas, which is coming up this week. And Dave, Merry Christmas to you and yours for sure.
Merry Christmas to you. And Alex, I know he'll listen to the show, I'm sure. Merry Christmas to you too as well, buddy.
He'll listen to it eventually. He doesn't have internet right now, but he'll listen to it at some point.
Right.
All right. We'll see y'all later.
See you.